Role-playing games are one of the earliest genres in video gaming. This is in part due to the fact that a core principle of role-playing games is that they use the imagination of the player to fill in a lot of the blanks, which was helpful at a time where there were large technical restraints in graphics and processing power. A lot of key aspects of the story or presentation of a game were left open to interpretation and imagination. Some of the most memorable stories of all time use this approach to storytelling.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
Just those few sentences created such a mystique, in your brain as a kid going, oh man, what was it like when Luke's dad was cool and Ben was young and they were hanging out and swashbuckling around the universe?
That's what's so powerful about this type of storytelling, allowing the audience, or the player in this case, to make up the story for themselves.
What's your name?
That's a lot more fun and interesting than if we're just explicitly told or shown these events.
Not everything needs to be totally explained.
Dark Souls is a series that takes a very minimalist approach to how much story and explanation you're given for most of the things going on in the world around you. It's up to the player to try to understand and come up with their own reasons for why the world and its inhabitants are the way they are. This is a core principle of role-playing games. It's the player's ability to create something out of very little, and it is on this basis that a lot of people over the years have come to say that Fallout 4 is a terrible role-playing game. This is attributed to how linear the story feels and how much the game holds the player's hand in terms of the kind of character you can be and what your goals can be within the game. I'm not here to necessarily dispute the fact that Fallout 4 is one of the weaker entries of the Fallout franchise, or even on its own merits as an RPG, a weaker game in the grand scheme of things. I'm here to pose the question, is Fallout 4 really a bad role-playing game? There's a really interesting video you can find where Dan Harmon, the writer of Community and Rick and Morty, talks about one of his more recent playthroughs of Fallout 4.
There's really this masterpiece, these female characters that they go like, oh, it's me, my name's Piper, and I'm a journalist, and I'm like, oh, I majored in journalism, and like, hey, like every time she goes like, hey, can I tell you something about my backstory and all this stuff, and then there'll be a button that says flirt, and then it'll build to a button that says romance.
He goes into excruciating detail for 13 minutes straight about just one small facet of the conversational system within Fallout 4. When I initially clicked on the video, I was expecting him to rail on the game for the small amount of freedom it gives the player and how constraining the writing feels. This is coming from Dan Harmon, who has a show called Harmon Quest where he plays Dungeons and Dragons and comes up with very complex and interesting plot lines and story arcs on the fly.
I run. What? Fondue? It's a character development thing.
As a writer by trade, using his imagination and creating stories is something he does every day, and he does it well. So I expected him to not be very fond of some of the more minimalist tools that Fallout 4 gives the player when it comes to the agency you have over your story and character. But that isn't what I got at all when I watched this video. What I got was Dan Harmon very earnestly talking about his experience playing the game and the dilemma in framing his romantic endeavors with all the characters he met during his adventures in the wasteland.
Have I talked about the Preston Garvey issue? He comes up to you when you're playing this game, when you get up to the peak levels with him, what he says is, there's one more thing I haven't told you. Before I met you, I lost so much hope that I wasn't sure if I wanted to live anymore.
I was ready to die. It was what I felt I deserved. It was what I wanted.
I've never told anyone that before. And just before I met you, I was really thinking about ending it all. And I really wanted to let you know that. And then you have 4 buttons, and one says like, flirt. And then one is like, hey, let's keep this professional or something like that. And then one is like, the one I would hit in real life, which is like, thank you for being honest with me. I appreciate how hard that must be.
I realized that Dan Harmon was using his imagination the entire time he was playing Fallout 4. But what's interesting is that he's able to sit there and get so much enjoyment out of even just such a small part of the game. I surely wouldn't say that the romantic subplots within Fallout 4 are very important, nor would I liken them to the complexity of the romance subplots from other games and RPGs like Mass Effect. So it's interesting that Dan Harmon got such a kick out of this feature. The only explanation that he got so much enjoyment is because he was giving the whole thing more meaning and more weight than even the developers or writers had. It's the difference between saying something nasty to someone because it's funny to you in a game as a player versus being polite in a conversation in a game because you know that's what your character would rationally do in that situation.
One is like the one I would hit in real life, which is like, thank you.
Harmon doesn't treat Garvey's romantic advances as something he can dismiss with a button press without batting an eyelash, even though he very well could. He thinks about what Preston might think of him when he does that. He gets concerned that Preston will get wise and realize he's just being given the runaround or cold shoulder. Harmon feels bad that Preston opened up to him, but he can't just reciprocate his feelings to make Preston feel good just because it's a simple button press away. Harmon doesn't have romantic feelings for Preston as a character, and he's thus unable to bring himself to reciprocate those feelings. Harmon has placed himself squarely in this scenario and feels a sense of agency over how it all plays out. That is role-playing done right. Dan Harmon is a storyteller that looks at a game like Fallout 4 as a blank canvas, as opposed to how others view it as a mostly completed paint by number. The next time you're experiencing a role-playing game, try to remember you really have the most agency over how the story plays out, who you are as a character, what your character traits and motivations can be, and how you perceive the events and the world of the game. Remember that the point of these games is to create a lot of the story yourself in your imagination. You're the one that's really supposed to be filling in the blanks. I don't think Fallout 4 is a bad role-playing game. I think Fallout 4 might suffer from not being that strong of a game in general, and especially in terms of the series that it has to be measured up to. I think Fallout 4 tends to lean a lot more towards action-adventure than role-playing. But at the end of the day, you're in control of the role-playing aspect of these games. The bar had been set very high for the Fallout franchise, and anticipation likewise. Compared to its predecessors, of course Fallout 4 takes a much different approach to the story and RPG elements of the game, as many of Bethesda's most recent titles have. Good RPG or not, whether you look at Fallout 4 as the blank canvas or the paint by number, ultimately, it's your decision to make. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more videos similar to this one, and let me know in the comments down below what you think about Fallout 4 and the RPG aspects of the game. Do you think it's a strong RPG game? Do you think it could be better? Why? Let me know. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.